Last episode, I said the first question in an AI transformation is not, where do we put AI? First question is, where's the leverage? Because if you can't answer that, AI just helps you do the wrong thing faster. This week, we got the lesson. The hard part is not getting people to build things. The hard part is getting people to stay honest about why they're building them in the first place. It sounds obvious, but it's not. Because once people start playing with these tools, the center of gravity starts to change and change fast. Somebody has an idea, they open Claude, Gemini, or whatever they're using. Somebody builds a thing. The thing kind of works. Now there's energy around it. People are excited once they see it. Once there's energy around it, it becomes very tempting to say, great, that's the project. But that's exactly where the process starts fighting back. My name is Mark Sirkin, and this is Playbook Broken. This is episode 2 in the Walk West 30-day AI challenge, where we're trying to figure out what this agency starts to look like on the other side of AI. Not by writing a giant transformational roadmap, not by rolling out subscriptions and calling that strategy, but by finding friction, finding small things, testing them with real people, and trying to be honest about what we learn. Last week was mostly about spot, that is, spotting friction. This week, build showed up a little early to the party. And then spot tapped it on the shoulder and said, whoa, not so fast. The team finished ranking the ideas that we had started out of our database. It was one of the things I wanted coming out of the first meeting. We generated a bunch of possible use cases: client delivery, time tracking, cross-team communications, Asana notifications, internal knowledge, scope cleanup, client portal, chief of staff, you name it. A bunch of things that live in that familiar agency swamp where work is technically getting done. Everyone is paying some hidden tax to get it across the finish line. The rankings were useful. And sure enough, top-ranked ideas were not necessarily the ones that had already moved into build. And that matters. Not because the prototypes were bad. They weren't. Some of them were actually really good. But this is the discipline of Spot. Spot is not asking, what can we build? Spot is asking, what friction is worth solving? Two different questions. And if you're not careful, AI collapses the distance between them in a way that feels productive, but can be dangerous. Because now the fact that something can be built quickly starts to masquerade as evidence that it should be built in the first place. It isn't. A prototype is evidence of possibility, not of priority. That's the line I found myself sitting with this week. The ranking exercise is there to test priority. And those two things are allowed to be in tension. Actually, they probably should be in tension, now that I think about it. This is where the sprints started to really feel real to me. In the kickoff, everybody nods along: spot, build, test, find friction, don't chase shiny objects, don't build on vibes. It all sounds great. Then actually what happened was somebody went off and built something really cool, actually built multiple things. And immediately the discipline gets harder. Because now you're not arguing with an idea anymore, you're arguing with a thing on a screen that does something. And things on screens have gravity. One of the team members came back with a rough client portal prototype, rough in the best possible way. Some of the data was real, some of it was fake, some of the buttons worked, some didn't. Some of it was connected to things like Asana, where they could be. Some of it was still make-believe, perfect at this stage. It's exactly the right fidelity for that moment. The portal was basically trying to solve the messy space we talked about in episode 1, the space between the work is done and the client feels taken care of. A podcast episode goes live, and everything suddenly exists: the links, the embed codes, the social clips, the captions, the Google Drive, the show doc. But the client experience is still an email with a pile of links in it. This is not because anybody's doing bad work. It's because the operational systems and the client experience are not the same thing. Asana might be fine for tasks. Google Drive might be great for files. Calendar might be good for dates. Emails might be the easiest way to bundle all that together. But from a client's point of view, it's fragmented. They don't care whether the thing lives internally inside our systems. They care about key questions: what's done, what's coming, what needs my attention, where are my assets, and what value am I getting? That's the portal, not as software, as a shape of the answer. And the minute the prototype was on screen, the conversation got better. That's the part I want to underline in this episode. The prototype was not the answer. The prototype was actually the conversation. Once we could see it, people stopped talking in abstractions. It wasn't, should we build a portal? It became, what should the client see? What should the internal team see? Is there an admin view? Is there a user view? Is there an exec view? Where does the data actually live? If Asana changes, does the portal change? If the client approves something, where does that approval go? Who gets it? Can we see approval history? Can we prove who clicked on what and when? Those are way better questions. Those are operating questions, transformational questions. A comment came from another team member who works more on the project management side, who was asking about, where does that approval go? What happens to it? And that's exactly right. Client approval is not just a nice little check mark. It's risk reduction. It's accountability. It's less rework. It's fewer arguments later. It's the difference between, I think they approved this, and here is the record. So the portal stopped being just a nicer client experience. It's becoming a way to talk about where the truth lives. That's what good prototypes do. They make the invisible system visible, in this case, powered by AI. But again, and this is important, that still doesn't mean the portal automatically wins. This is where I had to keep bringing the team back to the rankings, not to kill momentum, but to protect us from becoming random. The point of ranking the ideas was not to create a bureaucratic gate. It was to give us a way to check ourselves. If we're building something that scores lower on friction, impact, urgency, or scalability, fine. There may be a reason. Maybe it's already halfway built. Maybe it creates learning we can reuse somewhere else. Maybe it's a gateway to higher value problems. But we should know that. We should be able to say, yes, we saw the ranking. We know this wasn't number one. We're building it anyway because here's the learning value. Here's what the user can test with. Here's the friction it addresses. And here is why now. That's a very different sentence than this seemed cool, so we ran with it. Both sentences might produce a prototype. In fact, they both will produce a prototype, but only one of them is a process. And the process matters more now because AI makes motion cheap. That's one of the things I think people are underestimating. AI doesn't just make useful work faster. It also makes unfocused work faster. So the question then becomes, do you have enough discipline around the work to know the difference? The second thing that showed up this week is what I started calling the jagged edge of AI. Not everyone hits the same wall at the same time. Some people dive right in, open a tool, they start asking questions, connecting things, starting building, start breaking, start rebuilding. And other people, well, they just wait. They wait for access, or they wait for the right account. They wait for Claude specifically, wait for somebody to tell them what they're supposed to do, waiting for permission they already have. And this is one of those very human things that every AI transformation is going to run into, because the technology is not evenly distributed inside the organization, even when the tools technically are. People still have the habit. Some people have the confidence. Some people have the vocabulary. Some people know that if Claude is blocked, they can use Gemini or AI Studio or ChatGPT or something else. Some people don't. So what looks like a tooling problem is often actually an agency problem, lowercase agency. Do people feel authorized to try? Do they know where to start? Do they know the difference between the model, the interface, the workflow, and the prototype? Do they know that the first version is allowed to be bad? Do they know that they can ask the tool to explain the tool? That last one sounds silly, but it's actually not. A lot of people are still waiting for a training session where they could start by asking the AI, what can I do with you? What should I try first? What information do you need from me? That gap matters. A jagged edge is not just about capability, it's about behavior. And that showed up in another way. I suggested at one point that the team develop a PRD for each idea, product requirements document. And the response was basically, what's a PRD? Which is fair. It's not their fault, that's mine. I came in using product language because that's how I think about this kind of work. Define the user, define the problem, define success, define constraints, define requirements. Decide what's in scope and out of scope. Get crisp enough that the thing can be built and tested. But the team here is PRD and thinks, I don't know what that is. Then the language is getting in the way of the work. That's a mentor problem, not a team problem. So that's on me. So part of what I'm learning is that transformation has a translation layer. You can't just bring in product language or AI language or strategy language and expect it to land. You have to translate that into the operating reality of the team. In this context, maybe PRD is too formal. Maybe the right ask is simpler. Hey, before you build, ask 6 questions. Who's the user? What friction are they feeling? What are they doing today? What would be better? What does the prototype need to prove? How will we test it? That is, after all, PRD, basically. But it doesn't need to sound like one. And this matters because one of the fastest ways to make people feel stupid is to use insider language for something they're perfectly capable of understanding. Again, that's my bad. And if people feel stupid, they do stop experimenting. That's death in a 30-day sprint. The third thing that showed up was team behavior. I talked to some of the other teams now. There's 4 of us, 4 teams, that is, and they're taking different paths. Some teams heard the assignment, found one idea quickly, started building. Our team generated a lot, 14 or 15 in that first session, and we added on after that. So there's a lot of ideas to sort through. Now, to be fair, that was never the rule. Nobody said generate a lot of ideas. This is not an innovation theater contest where the team with the largest pile of sticky notes wins. But the different patterns are interesting. Some teams converge fast. Some teams diverge fast. Neither is completely right. Fast convergence can be great if the friction is obvious and the team is close to the work. It can also be premature. Divergence can be great if you're still mapping the terrain. It can also become a bit of an avoidance tactic. So again, the process is the thing. Can the team explain why this problem? Can they explain who feels it? Can they explain what changes if it gets solved? Can they show something real? Can they test it? That's really, in the end, what matters. Not whether they started with one idea or 30. There was one more moment that stuck with me. One of the ideas another team is working on overlaps with something our team is exploring. So I said basically, hey, go talk to them. And for some reason that had to be said. There's no secrets here. This is not a pitch competition. It's not a hackathon where everyone hides their idea until demo day. We're not trying to create 4 separate innovation islands. We're trying to transform the agency. If another team is working on something similar, go compare notes. Maybe the ideas are actually different. Maybe one is a client progress dashboard and one is a deliverables portal. Maybe they should connect. Maybe one team has solved a piece of the puzzle that the other team hasn't. Maybe they should merge. Maybe they shouldn't, but they definitely should talk. That's how the work gets better. I think sometimes organizations accidentally train people to stay in their lanes so well that collaboration starts to feel, like cheating. It isn't. If the goal is transformation, sharing context is not a violation of the rules. It's actually the point. And that's another process lesson. The rules we didn't state still shape behavior. I never said teams couldn't talk to each other, but apparently I also had not made it obvious enough that they should, and that's on us. In a sprint like this, ambiguity does not stay neutral. People fill it with whatever they think the hidden rules are. So if there are no hidden rules, you have to say that out loud. We also made one other process change, just in the context of having the conversations. At least this team, my team, doesn't have to pick one thing. I gave them permission to work on more than one idea if they break into smaller groups and stay anchored to the friction. That caveat matters. This is not permission to scatter. If one person has energy around time tracking, and another person has energy around client portal, and another wants to explore internal knowledge or chief of staff workflow, fine, go build something small and bring it back. But bring it back to the group. Bring it back to the friction. Bring it back to the ratings. Bring it back to the users. That's the rhythm I want to see. Build fast, but don't disappear. Because the work only compounds if the learning comes back into the system. Otherwise, you just get a bunch of private experiments. Useful maybe to the person who built them, but not transformational. Transformation requires shared learning. So here's where we are after week 2. The client portal prototype was useful. The time tracking idea got sharper. The internal knowledge idea still hanging around, and the chief of workflow staff seems useful, reusable, and actually pretty good. The rankings did their job by creating some tension. The tool access issue exposed a bit of the jagged edge. The PRD moment reminded me that mentoring requires translation. And cross-team overlap reminded me that collaboration has to be made explicit, even when it seems obvious. I think that qualifies as a good week. Messy, but good. Because this is what transformation actually looks like once it leaves the kickoff. It's not clean. People move at different speeds. They're in meetings for clients. They use different language. They have different levels of confidence. They chase different ideas. They misunderstand the rules. They wait for permission. They build things that aren't top ranked. They discover that the process isn't just something written down. It's something you have to keep reasserting to the team and to each other. That's the work. Last week, I said AI is a process diagnostic before it's a process replacement. This week, I'll add something to that. AI is also a behavior diagnostic. It shows you who experiments and who waits. It shows you who needs translation, who needs permission. It shows you who sees a workaround as a prototype and who sees a prototype as a product. It will show you who can stay with the friction when the shiny thing is already on the screen. That's not a tool question, that's an operating question. And that's why this sprint is useful, even if none of these prototypes become production. Because the point of the 30 days is not to end with a perfect app. The point is to build the muscle. Find friction, make it visible, test it, bring the learning back, then decide what deserves to become real. The prototype is the conversation. The process is what keeps the conversation honest. Thanks for listening.